policy and practice that will make a difference that we can individually influence. So on that note, let me turn to our panelists and we'll begin our walk around and reflections from COP29 and COP30 now. So if I may, I'm going to throw the first question out to Lynn. So Lynn, do you want to briefly introduce yourself and then I'll come out with questions?
Thank you, Ross. I'm Lindsay Miranda, a PhD student at School of Biological Sciences. I research the effects of microplastics on both human health and animal health. You might think, what does that have to do with climate? I think in my first year, I realized through doing a literature review that plastic pollution is not equal in all countries, and developing countries have a disproportionate amount of plastic in their direct environment and very close proximity to their food as well. So that inequality kind of started getting me thinking more on my project on a global sense. I have a background, so I was born and grew up on a Caribbean island called Aruba. Most people here haven't probably heard of it. It's very, very small. It's about 100,000 people. And it's very underrepresented in the global policy arena, let's say. So that's kind of where with all that experience, I went into COP. I'd done COPCAS the year before. So I had an idea of what the general structure was, but I wasn't exactly sure how the experience would be different being there on the ground. And I found it very eye-opening and very it's driven my passion far more than I had expected it would.
It's very good news. Actually, I'm going to take you back to that island perspective and the island voices. I remember you wrote a really beautiful blog last year about this, and perhaps you can come back to that point you just made about that representation. How do you see, or how did you in COP29 see those island voices, their cultures, priorities, lived experience being represented and reflected in COP29, or even was it overlooked in the negotiations?
I found I was really surprised. So as soon as you walked in, you had stalls on either side of different like pavilions of different countries and different communities as well. So even if a country didn't have even if a community didn't have a country backing because it spanned through multiple countries, that community was still present. And I found that it just led to so many conversations with people who I generally don't think would be so accessible to talk to. It's not every day that you get to talk to a really remote island that has very little internet access. And if I get to talk to them, they get to talk to, decision makers that they otherwise wouldn't be in the room with. So I found the representation was actually really good. I also thought it was quite interesting how the agenda set by the host presidency had a big effect, because the year that we went, the Azerbaijani presidency really made a focus on small islands. They tend to be very vocal because climate change is affecting them right now. They are the countries who are at, let's say, the front line of large storms, of flooding. They are the ones who risk complete land loss because of rising sea levels. We're not talking localized flooding, we're talking about airports being completely cut off. So that is their livelihood gone in the next 10 years or so. So they're very vocal, and I found that at COP29, they had a lot to say, and they were given a lot of platform. I joined a kind of a leaders summit, and it was just the presidents and the ministers, environmental ministers of several islands, saying their own case studies of what happened in their country in the last year. And you could really tell that had a certain level of power in the room. And it was really refreshing as an islander to see that and see it in a room where you do have representatives of the EU or the World Bank or these big financial bodies looking at it as well. I also found it really interesting in the green zone. You had smaller discussions, but they were very technical. And I was really surprised at how technical these conversations were, from aspects of law and how islands can access funding for rebuilding and adaptation, but also, the actual technology that's happening, using satellites to monitor mangroves or to look at sea levels and how the seaweed is growing. And it was just really lively, and I thought it was really refreshing.
Thanks, Lynn. So that could give us some optimism that there is representation that can help shape the global outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's what stood
really
out most for me.
Okay, and also, I mean, coming back to that technical part, I think that's really good to hear, and that actually will, I hope, take me into talking to you here actually, because well, do you want to just introduce yourself here, and then I can.
Yeah, I'm Thea. I'm also a PhD student based in meteorology. I am studying about water vapor in the atmosphere, which is one of the feedbacks for the climate system. So it's really integral to understand how water vapor is changing, to know how much the atmosphere is actually going to warm. So I look at that very technical, small part of a big system. But yeah.
But that's exactly what I wanted to come back to, listening to what Lynn has just said. You know, you are there, your research is looking at those physical processes that shape warming. So tell us a little bit more about how you found that those complexities were able, behind climate science that we understand, were able to come through, that negotiators, how they engaged with that.
Yeah, it was really interesting being there on the ground, because I think being specifically a climate scientist, there wasn't loads and loads of representation of us there in person. Yeah, but I mean, in a large sense, it's not a science problem right now in those buildings. I think what was illuminating though was we had the head of the IPCC come and give us a talk to the researchers at COP, and he really put forward, well, he gave us a really good talk about how integral the climate science is to literally all of that happening, all of these events, is because there's this massive basis of science information and a really rigorous process, which is undeniable. And that's why all of this is happening. So it was a very compelling case. And also just the amount of work and resourcing and all of the science that goes on behind the scenes was shown to us in that talk. I think there were loads of side events and smaller discussions about the science, and there's lots of chat about tipping points and big dramatic things, and also trying to understand the systems and how warning systems need to be developed. So there was a lot of technical discussion also. I wouldn't say those were necessarily the main points of conversation in the actual negotiations, because that's not what they're negotiating necessarily. They're negotiating about finance mainly when we were there. But all of these other discussions going on around the core negotiations were really using the science, about the science, and that's a massive part of uncertainty, of questioning, of how do you deal with that. And so yeah, it was definitely a really cool part of what was going on, not necessarily in the specific financial technical negotiations, but they are built on the science, and that's what we were kind of shown by the.
It's a jigsaw puzzle. All these pieces need to be in play, and the science is a very important part of that. So it's good to hear that this isn't just a nice to have. It actually really shapes and drives. Yes, it's a political process at the end of the day, especially when we get to week 2.
Yeah.
But it is there, providing that
undercurrent,
base foundation. And of course, this is very important when it comes to data and evidence and understanding changing impacts. So, but it's really interesting to hear about, that alongside this, you would say that those side events, the pavilions, are really helping to surface the deeper technical science.
Yeah, for sure. And also link it to other aspects, there was some really good talks on health and how climate links to health from the World Health Organization. So I think there was amazing links being made as well. It wasn't just this is climate, it was all linking together, which I think an arena like that really fosters, because there's so many different people from different areas coming together.
Thank you. So Juan, perhaps come to you now as well. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, my name is Juan Garcia Valencia. I'm also a PhD student at the Department of Meteorology, and my research focuses on monsoons, specifically the impact of different sea surface temperature patterns on monsoon variability and change. So you can imagine that climate change is a big part of my project itself. Hence why I've always been interested in going to COP and why it was such a great opportunity as well.
Thank you. So of course, doing research on monsoons, which are also very significantly affected by the sea surface temperatures as well. This affects billions of people. So from your vantage point when you were in Baku, did you find that those risks that you are aware of from the research that you do, did you feel that the negotiations were really reflecting adequately the scale of that risk? It's understood from the climate system.
Well, thank you for your question. And you're absolutely right. Monsoons are incredibly important. Around 60% of the world's population relies heavily on these annual monsoon rains. And with climate change, they are going to be changing. They're going to be much more unpredictable. They're going to be much more changeable, and they could be even more extreme. So research in monsoons and in tropical meteorology has never really been so important. And what was really nice, or what actually surprised me, is that going to COP with the idea or with the mission of spreading this message of urgency and importance around monsoons and climate science, and how important it is for it to be incorporated into climate action. I found that there were so many other scientists in the same position trying to spread their message on their own niche, I guess, research area in science, and trying to get it incorporated into climate policy. I think I saw this as well in the pavilion events, particularly the Science for Climate Action event, a pavilion, sorry, hosted by the World Meteorological Organization. They had events running every single day, and so many delegates there, ready to talk about science and how important it is for climate policy. And you also had the Ring of Constituency, the second largest constituency in COP, filled with scientists, all there to push this agenda of science into climate policy. What was deeply disappointing was not seeing this science echoed in the negotiation rooms. You walk into the negotiation rooms and they're all talking about the placement of a comma in one of the draft texts, or we have certain negotiation blocks saying that they should change the word from countries must reduce something to countries are urged to reduce blah blah blah. So in a way, taking away that responsibility or sense of urgency that is so important in the draft texts. Where I do see some alignment in sort of science and policy is perhaps in some of the more local, nationally determined contributions, including maybe even the UK NDC that was announced when we were in COP29, and how they are trying to, or set the target to reduce emissions by at least or below 81% below 1990 levels. Which was exactly what the Climate Change Committee had advised. But still, there's so much work that needs to be done in this NDC for it to be aligned with the Paris Agreement deal and to stay under or as close to 1.5 as we can. So there's definitely still a lot of work. And I think this COP, as you were saying, is going to be a really important one. I think this idea of science incorporated into policy is also on the President Lula da Silva's minds. I think it was in his opening speech that he labeled this COP as the COP of truth, particularly referring to leaders around the world, without naming names, that are sort of spreading this climate denialism narrative. And so it's never been so important to highlight key scientific findings, like the fact that overshooting 1.5 is becoming a little bit of a reality in all our talks about climate policy.
Yeah, absolutely. This COP of truth. Thank you very much, Juan, for those points, particularly on your disappointment. So some of the gaps still in terms of the size, but a lot of that comes from the framing of the UNFCCC and the need for consensus of 197 countries, with the EU making the 198th country, and that's the basis of the Framework Convention on Climate Change. So those commas make differences to countries and the representation. So that's important, but you then get this tension. So thank you for that. Emmy, perhaps I can come to you as well, and you could like to introduce yourself first.
Yes, so I am a second year PhD student and also in the Department of Meteorology. Obviously, in meteorology, we care about climate. I've been, well, my research is paleoclimate. So I'm looking at the history of changes in climate in South America, which of course includes the Amazon rainforest. So I'm very excited that the COP's in Belém, right on the edge of the forest this year. And I haven't been to a COP in person, but I've had the pleasure both last year and this year being in the Climate Action Studio of the Pearl. So any PhD students, if you have the chance to be part of that another year, I would absolutely encourage you to do so.
Thank you for that.
Well, I mean, you have all done it as well, so yeah, it's really exciting. So I have no background in policy or understanding how policy works before I started getting involved in the COP, and then actually took another Pearl course on that related to that. So for me at the beginning, it really felt like being able to see behind the curtain, being in the studio, because we were able to link to a lot of the meetings that are happening at the COP in Baku when you were there, and now this year in Belém. But for me, the highlight of my COPCAS studio was when we were directly speaking to you and you were on the ground, because it's like hearing from people you know, people you are friends with, who are telling you what they're seeing and telling you, what they've, what's the mood of the place, as well as the things that you can read in the reports from journalists. It really gives you a sense of, well, whether it's disappointment, whether it's excitement, whether something's been achieved. And so of course, it's early days in the COP this time, but the sense that we're getting from on the ground in Belém is very constructive. And I know it's the first week, and I learned last year that maybe it gets a bit harder in the second week, but in the first week, it has been very constructive in terms of the way that people, the parties, the nations who are at COP are engaging with each other. You spoke about the implementation being a really big focus, which means actually getting down and doing something, not just making some pledge, but actually what are the steps to make the pledge happen. And the Brazilian Post have described this global mutirão, to make it, which is an indigenous word, meaning that it's a shared project. They want to make it a shared global project. And I think that was highlighted even at the beginning of this week, where there were discussions about what should be on the agenda and were they going to change it. I think when you were there, it took them like 3 days to agree the agenda, because there were lots of discussions about, do we want this on, do we agree, do we not? And it seems that the Brazilian presidency has appealed on Sunday afternoon, appealed to everybody to say, look, we understand these topics, you want to be on there, we are going to discuss them, but in the interest of moving this forward, can we all agree that we'll start from what's already published? And then everybody agreed. And so they're already kind of 2 days ahead than when you were there, because they got down to work on day one, which I take as a positive.
Thank you. I mean, actually, I was just going to throw one question out to all of you from last year, because it's so important this year in terms of the adaptation discussions on the global goal of adaptation last year, and those metrics, which are so important, and the financial instruments that were discussed. How did they land with you from last year? I know we're going off from your research now, but thinking about that, all the discussions we had during last year around financial instruments and the World Bank coming in or not, how, given this very tangible, I mean, I'm seeing this as well after 10 years of going into COPs. First time in 10 years I've not been on the ground, but I can already see from the perspective of the studio that there is a different atmosphere there. It is constructive. Let's hope that continues. But how do you think, this is success more likely as a result of the adaptation and finance discussions last year? How did they land with you? Are they proportionate to the risks that are actually being faced? Open to all of you.
I think I would start with just what it felt like there. We were both, me and Juan were there in the second week, which is kind of when it starts getting real. Like there's lots of nice speeches, and then it's like, oh dear, we've got to sign something and agree on something. And it was very dramatic in the last couple of days there. There was people storming out of rooms and lots of places that we couldn't go into because they were having private discussions when they shouldn't always be doing that really technically, and it was quite high energy and emotional at points. People were really furious about the lack of commitment to funding and finance coming from different countries. So from like, I suppose this is just like a reflection on the last year, it felt very dramatic, and I don't think it was left. I mean, an agreement was made, but I don't think people were particularly happy across the board. It was definitely a compromise, which this is, I suppose, the reality of COPs. They are always compromised. I heard somewhere where if everyone is a bit unhappy with the outcome, then you kind of got a negotiation. The people who are pushing for more don't quite get more, but the people who are pushing for less didn't quite get as less as they wanted. So everyone was a bit, like, well. So maybe that is just me learning the reality of like how you negotiate on such a large scale with so many different perspectives and actors wanting completely different things. So yeah, I think that was just like where we left off last year, maybe. I don't know if anyone else got a different sense from it, or
I definitely agree. I think so. When I was there, everyone was leading up to this 1 trillion set goal. So developing countries and islands and the African states all were pushing for $1 trillion. They ended up on 300 billion, with the idea that that would be from public sectors, and then businesses and private sector would bolster it up to 1.3 trillion. Obviously that didn't happen. It all like got very intense, and then it ended. And I think some of that frustration from those who were fighting for that 1 trillion is still felt. I think when I was there, it was like two discussions happening. Some people were still really like, we need this money, we need it to be as high as we can get. But there was also a big group of people who were saying, especially from the islands, who were like, okay, this money's there, but we cannot access the money. So it doesn't even matter if we're at 1 trillion, if we can't access it for what we need it.
at a fast pace enough. Like they were saying, sorry, there were some stories of people saying that they like applied for funding, and it was then like 3 years later when they got funding to recover from a storm, and they were like,
exactly. And I think when you mentioned about the commas, and sometimes they can be really frustrating, and I've definitely realized that there is a balance between progress and making sure that things don't get missed out as well. Because I went to a talk, and it's really stuck with me, about St. Martin and how they had to deal with the aftermath of a big hurricane. And St. Martin is half connected to French and half connected to Holland. And the comma and how each part negotiated it with their own kingdom country, I guess, meant that the French side got a lot of support and a lot of access to this funding to be able to rebuild and adapt, while the Dutch side didn't. And you can only imagine what socio-economic effects that would have if you have a country that's split through half. One half can adapt, one can't. So I think that just shows how complicated this all is, and the 1 trillion of the finance is so big that, yeah.
Thank you. Perhaps I could, before we connect over to Bella, just throw it back out to everybody here. This is a conversation. Are there questions, issues that have come up from listening to our wonderful student voices here? Things that you'd like to ask? I mean, it's very interesting, actually, that point about the tension, because that just reminds me of the conversation we just had in the studio, actually. Or although Jalen has just disappeared out, hopefully when Jalen comes back in, Emmy, you were there, and and it goes back to the situation of this COP being in the Amazon. And first of all, I mean, how do you think that will influence, or is influencing, to the COP? We're on day 4. That proximity of trees, nature.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it does. We can ask Emmanuel in a little, but he told us a bit yesterday that the air is fresh and the trees are there, and as you walk out of the venue, you will see some of the forest. So that does really concentrate people's minds that the forest is there. And Lula even mentioned it in his opening speech. We hope that it's going to cause people to be reflective and really think about it. I mean, I say it's relevant for my research, but the Amazon rainforest is one of those tipping points that you mentioned here, that it's storing a lot of carbon, and if we don't look after it, the risk is that will be released, and that would be dramatically bad for the atmosphere. So that is important. And I recall when you were on the ground that you were telling how you just could see petrol refineries and smell the petrol.
Yeah, you could even smell it. And getting from the airport to the COP conference centre, you went past a load of oil rigs, which was like quite well. It's a stark reminder in a different way.
Yeah,
it's a less positive reminder, but it was still like, oh, this is the reality we're dealing with.
The same was true in Dubai when Octopus Energy, with about 2 weeks to go before the COP28 discussions, Octopus came in and put huge pink windmills, jet turbines, in front of the oil platform, so that as all the COP delegates travelled on the train backwards and forwards to the convention centre, you saw these stark, bright pink Octopus Energy turbines, which reminded you, because behind them was the oil, where we were trying to get to. And of course, COP28 was very much about phasing out fossil fuels and the tense discussions that happened right at the end. So, in those few words around phasing out fossil fuels, but yes, there's something always very salutary about the environment that surrounds COP, whether it's Katowice in Poland, and a very industrial town, or whether we're in Dubai or Sharm el Sheikh, which is just desert and sand, apart from artificial construction. So there's always something that's very important, I think, that juxtaposition between the environment that COP is actually hosted in and the discussions that are going on. So thank you very much. If there are any thoughts or questions at all.
So, speaking of the science at the COP event this year, there is a lot of discussion on the global goals for adaptation. They're extremely interested in the science of managing it. And I'm wondering if you guys are following the indicators in any of the discussions going on about accepting those indicators and the proposed implementation for that, or new implementation for that.
I'll take that. So I think there's a target of reducing the indicators, and perhaps for those who haven't been following so closely, what we know is that when we talk about mitigation of emissions, it means that we want to reduce the amount of emissions, because the more carbon in the atmosphere, the more effect it has on the water vapor and so on. But with adaptation, it's very localized, and it means that in order to measure whether a project is successful, so that we have transparency on those things, the project that's in an island in the Caribbean might be reasonably measured in a different way than a coastal project somewhere, or an area of flooding, or an area of drought. So it's very difficult to agree what the indicators are. The target of 100, I think they're targeting for at the moment. 100 is already a lot, and I think they've squeezed in a lot of sub-targets under some of the 100. But that being said, so we don't know what the outcome will be, but we do know that it's absolutely on the agenda. And I think I am an optimist, but this constructive approach of saying the COP presidency has been talking for months about, we need to choose to change. We need to see the positive potential future and choose to change and do it together. That with that in mind, that it will be possible to reach an agreement that isn't so bruising. It's obviously a different topic, but the agreement that was made last year, as Thea described it, was bruising for the nations who really needed more and needed faster access. So I'm hopeful that they will agree something that everybody can, like you said, nobody's really happy with it, but everybody can kind of work with it. We can get to a place where we can move forward, and that's related to work on things called COP of adaptation. It's related to the implementation work to say, let's let's agree the processes to get the money out and get the projects done, and then measure them with the various criteria. But let's focus on the doing and not just the make a pledge and have our picture taken, but just do the work. So I'm hoping that's where we're going to land, but we'll have to see next week.
I can say something a little bit more. I mean, I haven't followed this COPCAS closely because I'm in my final. I'm trying to finish my PhD. But I did spend the summer working at the UK Climate Change Committee, where I was working the adaptation team, and there was. Currently, they're writing up a report on adaptation, which is coming out next year, and even on a national scale, coming up with indicators and understanding what adaptation actually means is like a huge question, and one that is 20 years behind mitigation, really. Like, to be able to quantify it is like, we didn't know how to do it, basically. So it's a really interesting area. I think it's where loads of development in like understanding what adaptation really fundamentally means and how do you know that it's working is so complex, because it's not just a number of gas that has been emitted by a country, and the way it interacts with different people, communities across just even the UK is like mind-boggling, let alone the globe. So yeah, it's definitely a really, really interesting area. I'm sorry I haven't followed this.
No thing, but I'm glad you raised that, and we have throughout the year been supporting some of the discussions on the global goal and adaptation and those metrics, and what constitutes transformational adaptation, which is the discussion ongoing, and particularly that link in terms of quantitative evidence that determines whether an adaptation intervention is successful for who, and what does that look like. And so that a lot of the ongoing work at the PAL with the UNEP is being able to put on a number on the right metric, and then using that to be able to assess options, and then importantly continue to track the effectiveness of those interventions for those people living here, their climate risk, which is paramount. And seeing how that is pulled through into the global goal and adaptation, that's certainly some of the work programs that we continue to intervene on and with, so we can connect research directly to the policy making and the discussions that actually happen. So yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks for those contributions as well. Juan, I just want to actually just finish off, because as you two were both talking, it also reminded me of this need to change, and actually this conscious decision, the choice to move forwards into a green economy. How useful! I know that you were partly engaged with the private sector last year as well. So how important, and what have you seen shifts in that engagement with COP, and that spirit of the global material, actually the collective action, which includes private-public partnerships? How important is that? The financial flows and regulatory frameworks and engagement of the private sector in supporting that choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if we go back to COP29 from last year, my first day was actually in the green zone, and I found it really interesting in the green zone, which is the one that the public has access to, as opposed to the blue zone when you need a special badge. That green zone was filled, particularly in Baku, with a lot of petrol and oil and gas companies that had really amazing stands showcasing their green activities. But of course, when you start talking to them and seeing what they're actually doing, you start questioning how green they actually are. And it was quite interesting to see that many oil and gas companies having their stands there, as it really, I guess, it's becoming part of their image, particularly on that year with Azerbaijan hosting COP. So I think that just really emphasizes the role of the private sector and of these companies in narrative about climate policy. It's not just about the role of government or the role of the general public, but have such huge amounts of money is also really important. And I think that links back to the NCQG or the New Collective Quantified Goal and how these countries then gained that money from that goal. You know, a lot of this money was given in the form of loans as opposed to grants, and that was a huge problem because then it really just sort of re-emphasizes the problems that already exist in terms of climate debt and marginalizes a lot of these communities that need that money, but then can't access that money because of the climate debt they'll get into. So I think there's really interesting conversations to be had between the private and the public sector when it comes to financing.
Thank you. But very a wholly important conversation that needs to happen in terms of collective action and joint partnership, not joint partnership in these processes. So, thank you. I think we can probably go live to Bella now. I'm just looking hard at Constance's face to check whether we are connected to Emmanuel.
He's here.
Brilliant. So let's see if we can tap into some of the energy and the constructive work that's going on. Good afternoon, Emmanuel. I'm trying to see you.
I can hear you. I can hear you. Good to see all the wonderful faces from last year. Juan, Tia, Ben, Emmy.
That's wonderful, Emmanuel.
I've been listening in. I'm on camera. I'm on camera.
Yeah, we can see you here, but
Oh yes, I can see you there.
But
Sorry,
not the rest of the room.
I've got you now.
I'm on camera. So
Basil is just going to see if he can move you onto the main screen.
yeah,
There you go. That's fantastic.
there I am. Tell Basil if he doesn't put me on camera, when I see him next time, I'll not say hello. So that's fine.
Lovely to see you again for our daily update. So in the COPCAS studio, we connect live once per day and to our delegation. And Emmanuel is working incredibly hard in heavy rains and extreme temperatures over 40 degrees, I believe, in Belém at the moment. So meaningful weather to to focus delegates and negotiators' minds, I think, as well as the proximity to the tree. So welcome back, Emmanuel. It's lovely to see you. And you've got a great backdrop there. Is that a photo, or are you actually sitting outside the front?
It's bright. So this was taken at night just to rub it into Tia, Lynn, and the others. You know, just to make them jealous. Yeah. Sorry. I have to say something.
You know how much I miss not being there.
I'm sorry.
Let's get
Yes.
serious. What I mean, it's just opened this morning, and negotiations are beginning. We're on day 4. So how do you feel the atmosphere? We just had discussions about positivity, optimism, constructive, ideas. What do you think?
Ross, where do I start? I think let me take it from the first meeting I went yesterday with Al Gore, shedding light on carbon trace and climate trace and the measurement and the need for measurement. And Al Gore highlighted one key challenge, which is about data and measuring data, and the fact that if we cannot measure, we cannot manage. And I think the highlight for me as someone from the continent is that the whole of Africa, there's only 2% measurable data. That measurable data leads to the contribution Emmy alluded to. So there's only 2% contribution to Africa. Florida has more contribution than the whole of Africa. If we are not getting the contribution to Africa, how is adaptation working? When I joined, it was Tia who mentioned the delays for the monies to get to people. Tia, I'm sorry, I cannot give you any credible positivity there. It's the same. I sat in climate finance strategies yesterday, and someone from Sudan said they are still waiting for their money 3 years on. That's sad. That's sad. In that climate finance strategies, it was interesting to see a rep from the World Bank, a rep from the global climate fund, the green climate finance, adaptation finance, and there was another gentleman. The money is sitting with the private sector. The private sector are the one contributing the most. And we all know that the NDCs have not contributed to the pledges, there are delays, and that has affected so many things. World Bank is saying that they are making enough donations to help. However, I noted that adaptation out of all the finances is the one that gets the least money. And it's simply because if there are things in place to stop or mitigate, then you are not adapting to anything. So you don't get money to adapt. And that's how they are shifting the goalposts on that side. So that was a story and a half, but it was challenging to hear what was happening. We are still in deficit. We are not going to reach that 1 trillion. I heard just this morning that there's a shift forward towards more contribution, a threefold shift towards more contribution. But sadly, we are going to realize this on the last day, just like last year. So that shift might never happen. I don't know why there's a last day. If everything is done the last day, might as well wait and come for the last day and get everything done on the last day. But that's what I hear. I don't know. Running through this, there was a lot about the global stock take, where we are with the global stock take. Unfortunately, there's a balance, because all of a sudden, the global stock take team are questioning the data that is used to analyze or provide results. And therefore, people are questioning why IPCC is the sole body that provides the data. They need rivaling, competing groups. And that is a game shifter. That is a game shifter. So IPCC are stressing that they are the only ones who are actually assessing. They are the only ones who are actually giving data that assesses, whilst others are giving data that cites. So there's a game shifter there. And that's why I told Constance I needed to stay in the Ringo meeting with the IPCC person, who is now pleading for us all to get involved to make sure that this non-government, intergovernmental IPCC short, it's not split into various components as it's being seen now. I think there was someone who said that India said that, why don't we just get rid of IPCC? Now, for me, that would be a shame if that happens. And that has stopped the discussions around global stock take. I was looking at today's schedules, and I have about 20 global stock takes going on. There's one on 4, there's one, so many, I don't even know which one to go to, and they all have the same title, by the way. So the details will be in when I get into those rooms. There was a discussion yesterday about measurable data and who owns the satellite, and therefore who actually owns the data to share the data. Now I mean, we are shifting the goalposts. Just yesterday, I was so keen. I think today, I don't know where I am. I'm so enthusiastic, but I think there's so many movements through the afternoon to the evening that even just saying that we need to manage, we need to measure, and now the question about who owns the data to share the data, it is becoming something else, because of course the satellite should be owned by someone. The satellite should be given to someone. And that's another concern. I don't know where we got with that. Apparently the presidency, sorry.
Just on that point on the ownership of data, do you think that's come into the spotlight more because of the US shutdown, for example? Of course, they fund and manage and, let's say, extract data from the parties and have done for a long time. And with the shutdown, not only the government, but also the cut of aid programs, we've seen a global deficit on the data that's been provided to countries, their data. So do you think that's put that spotlight on ownership, and perhaps that might be a positive shift?
You have taken the wind out of the sail, as they say. You've said it all, Ross. That's the biggest problem. And therefore, they're asking China to get involved. And China is coming in with the key stake in all this. But that is the biggest problem. I wrote it on, so unfortunately you cannot see. But because US has pulled out, China has been asked to do more. And all of a sudden, it's become so overwhelming for China. So we watch the space, basically, watch the space. And I think it goes back to people now wanting to authenticate the data that comes from China. And I don't know where we are going since yesterday. I really don't know, but that's swing. There's a discussion.
Discussions about building infrastructure in countries so they can generate, collect, manage, and have real ownership of their own data.
There was a lot of discussion about that yesterday in one of the meetings I went to. But they need finance to do that. And if the finance is taking 3 years to do that, then no one is building that infrastructure. And especially there was a plea that the very deprived places where there's a lack of data, those places should be looked at first. One person pleaded that, is there a way to just give these finances to these people to start acting so that they can start collecting the data? And there was a plea from one of the adaptation gap reporters that we need evidence data. That evidence data has to come from the locals to the regionals to the country it has to come from the ground up. This is where bottom up is practical. But for now, there's no money to put these in place. I sent a picture to COPCAS very sure not long ago where forestation is creeping into one part of Brazil. They're trying to get people on the ground, but they need money, and that's going to have to create about 1,500 jobs for a population of about 10,000. So that's a lot. But there's no money to give these people to start creating the jobs. And we are talking about Brazil, where the presidency is currently sitting. So if the presidency is showcasing this to the whole world and they are not getting the data, how is Ghana getting the data? How is Papua New Guinea getting the data? I went to the Green Zone yesterday. The protest on Monday, they've moved all of them to the Green Zone. So the indigenous people are sat there.
Sorry, Manuel, just let people know what that was about on Monday. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you very much. Please stop me. So on Monday, about 8:30 p.m., there was a protest about recognition of what is happening with the rainforest and how the indigenous people are not getting the buy-in into decisions that are being made by us. Basically, we've flown in and we are here showcasing the forest, but we are not actually involving them in the decision making and all those things. They are indigenous people, but they are not indigenous. They are not the people who are actually coming from the forest. And I wanted to see some of these wonderful, amazing people, and I saw them. Basically, they are not wearing gloves. Let me put it that way. They are just covering some important parts, and that's it. And they are sat there, and you could see the pain on their faces to get support. Forget about Brazil. This is not the world. We are in their zone. We are in their territory. We are talking about how amazing the forest is, how 5 o'clock it rains every time. But these are the people who are in the forest experiencing this rain constantly, experiencing the challenges of the water levels rising. They are constantly having to move plants into their small buildings along the river. And yet we are stopping them to tell the whole world that they are suffering. I think that protest was needed. At least it showed that these people care to move from where they are to the people, but they've all been moved to the Green Zone. And one was talking about the Green Zone. The carpet is green. Everything there is green this time. It's actually green. All the walls are green. But
Emmanuel, on that note, can I just do a pause for a moment and just while you're there, could I perhaps the panel or anyone from the audience has a question for Emmanuel? Hot to Belém, quite literally. Anything you'd like to? We have one question.
I have a question.
Yes.
About the protest, how do you think it was received by different people? Like, how was it received by the different people that are attending?
Great question.
Very, very good question. I think it depends on whom you talk to. Most of us here see it as positive. There's a heavy military presence because they think it's detrimental on the government's perspective or how Brazil is showcased to the world. We see it as amazing because that's why we are here. If we don't want to see them talk about their land, then we might as well not be here. We might as well go elsewhere. So most of us participants see it as very positive. However, no one high up is telling us the decisions they are making about it. The presidency has stopped any meeting after 6 p.m. because of that. It stopped. And therefore, there's a backlog of decisions being made. And I think we are not going last day. Give it 5 days last day. We are not going anytime soon. Well, I'll be home. I have things to do. So I'll be
As with many of the delegates, that will have a really significant knock-on effect because most of the time the meetings go through till 11 p.m. and into the night. Jalen?
So in Brazil right now, there is an ongoing conflict with Lula being president. He's talking about trying to fund the green energy transition. He wants to be net zero, but then new oil is being researched in the Amazon. I think it's in the equatorial margin, and I wonder if these protests you reckon are related to this, that conflict between we care about the Amazon, we're pushing to net zero, but then that conflict of pushing forward with oil and gas against all of these organizations, strong resistance to it.
Great question. Manuel, did you catch that one?
Yeah, I did. Great question. Unfortunately, I don't speak their language, so it's very difficult to ask the indigenous. It was very difficult to say anything to them. I couldn't communicate. But just looking at the river, the color of the river, I don't even think it's brown. It's not brown. It's not yellow. I don't know the color. So if they are now going to mine oil along this basin, wow. That might be the reason why they are protesting. I'll try and find out, but no one higher up is talking. I'll see if I go to Green Zone today whether someone can interpret and help me get something out of our colleagues there from the indigenous people. I'll see what I can find. And please come back to COPCAS tomorrow and get that information. I'll do my best to go and find the information. I'll do my best.
You are our eyes and ears on the ground. Thank you very, very, very much, Emmanuel. I'm very conscious of the time, so I think we'll close the questions here. I think we have a poll that Basil can facilitate for those online, and I think there might be a QR code as well.
Yes.
Great. Please, this is your chance of just 2 short questions. The first on where you individually. The first is on what you individually all think about the value of COP, actually. We'd be quite keen to hear your instinctive reaction to that question. There we go.
For people who are here in the room, enjoy the Teams link, and I'm going to launch the polls now so that you can.
Brilliant.
Let's see. Let's give it a try.
It's our first time using Teams polls. So nice to meet you.
Sorry. It's okay. Don't worry.
Just mute.
Sorry.
So, first question, just a like it one. Please, panel, do join. Every view counts, Basil. You too. I'd like to hear your opinion. Everybody is a member of Dennis.
For other people, the volume will come on.
Emmanuel, please feel free to answer as well. So the first question just 1 to 5, like it. 1. And then the second one is very much about what would you, if you could feed one message back to those negotiators in Belém today, what would that message be? It can be one word, a couple of words, a phrase. Can be from the heart, can be from the science. But connect, this is our bridge today back to Belém. And Emmanuel will take these thoughts. Won't you, Emmanuel? So choose change. Politics and misinformation. Listen to the facts. Implementation. Thank you for these thoughts. Listen. Humanity. Grounded assessment. Data and evidence problems. All these things that we've been talking about today. Okay. I think that's quite a clear set of messages there, Emmanuel. If you could just take that to the Africa Group negotiators. So, of course, Emmanuel has, I forgot to say, he has a role. He is part of the African Group of Negotiators, the AGN, the negotiating bloc in COP. I can see you've just taken a picture of those messages. So there we go. We've connected straight back into those teams. And with that, I would just, this will stay over 50 minutes, but just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody here. Thank you to panelists. Thank you for coming back. Actually, one quick question. Has it made a difference to all of you in COP29? Has it made a difference to your research trajectory, your path since then? How you've done your research, where you're thinking of going?
Yeah, I can start. So I think for my project, I think going there really emphasizes the importance of sharing your insights and your science to the wider public so that it can actually be, something can be done with it, so that it doesn't just stay within the scientific community, but actually stretches to other disciplines as well. And I guess more personally, for me, it reinvigorated my passion for the science and climate policy interface, and it's definitely something that I want to do in the future. So I'm definitely looking for opportunities more in that section now.
Thanks, Juan.
Yeah, I think for me it feels so sometimes untangible what I'm researching, and it felt so like a really necessary reminder. And I think we don't get it enough as, like, if you're a pure scientist, what your work actually means and how it actually has a human impact, and there's a necessity to it. So for me, like, it's really helped to refocus my passion for what I'm doing and remind myself of the importance of what I'm doing on a personal level. It also meant that I applied for the Climate Change Committee role in summer, which again was really important for me personally, to try and work out where I feel like emphasis needs to be, where work needs to be done still. So yeah, I haven't come to any conclusions about it, but it's
different steps as a result.
Yeah.
Lynn?
I think for me, I think it's changed. So in biomedical science, it tends to be very, research, publication, focus, very academic, only staying in that bubble. I think this has really made me realize how siloed research can be, and how we think there's so much impact just because it's out in academia, but actually on the ground, it might not actually, the people who need the information don't have access to it. And I think that's really changed completely how I see research, how I see my career and everything going on.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And Emmy?
Well, very briefly, I'm just going to echo the points made, really. I think it absolutely helps you to centre the research in some reality and think about what it's going to be used for and what impact it will have. And so it's really made me think about that.
Thank you so very much. That's really, I think, sums what climate change is. It is about our humanity and where that ends up, where we go. So make the choice, and thank you for choosing today to come. Thank you to those online. Emmanuel's hand is bursting. Emmanuel, you have the final
yes,
word.
Just to say, and just to add to what colleagues have said over there, I just want to echo something I said yesterday, which has become a theme running through the impact of climate is here. It's not for the future anymore. So what we do now is key. So those of us who think that climate change is for the future, please look around. It is now, it's here. So if there's anything I would encourage colleagues who are listening back in Reading, just look around and you'll see how climate change is impacting us. And therefore we need to capacity build for the future. We have the young ones sat up front now. They're now keen on science. Everybody's shifting away from science to business to arts. We need more people coming into science to take our place in future when we are not there, so that it will tip back to 1.5, if for nothing else, not go to 2, because that's not what I want to see myself or my children grow to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Use our voice, use our choice, and come back again next year. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Basil. Thank you, Emmanuel. Lovely to see you. See you online.